This episode is brought to you by Indeed. Stop waiting around for the perfect candidate. Instead, use Indeed sponsored jobs to find the right people with the right skills fast. It's a simple way to make sure your listing is the first candidates see. According to Indeed data, sponsored jobs have 4 times more applicants than non-sponsored jobs. So go build your dream team today with Indeed. Get a $75 sponsored job credit at Indeed.com/podcast. Terms and conditions apply.
Disney Plus wants to know, are you ready? For Marvel Studios' Thunderbolts, The New Avengers, now streaming on Disney Plus.
Let's do this.
One of the best Marvel movies of all time is now streaming on Disney Plus.
Hey, you weren't listening to me.
I said Thunderbolts, The New Avengers is now streaming on Disney Plus.
Meet the New Avengers.
That's a cool name.
Marvel Studios' Thunderbolts, The New Avengers, rated PG-13, now streaming on, you guessed it, Disney Plus.
Welcome to Her Extraordinary Life by Design, where we celebrate women who are shaping their lives one extraordinary day at a time. I'm your host, Leslie Gaudet, self-care coach for women who are ready to make self-care a priority to support them in life and business. Every week, I'll be speaking with inspiring women from various walks of life who will share their personal journeys and will discover how they have fearlessly carved their own paths as business owners, passionately pursuing their dreams and creating a meaningful impact on their communities. So let's get started. Hello, and welcome to Extraordinary Life by Design podcast. I'm your host, Leslie Gaudet, and today we are talking with Sarah Michelle Boes. Sarah is an author, speaker, and former founder who built and sold a multi-million-dollar education company in the healthcare space. After scaling the business to national reach, she exited the company and shifted her focus to writing, advocacy, and public-facing work. Her work is informed by lived experience. Sarah speaks openly about living with OCD and anxiety and how learning to work with her nervous system reshaped how she approaches ambition, work, and self-trust. She's also the mother of a child with a congenital heart defect. Navigating her daughter's medical journey deeply influenced her personal and professional direction and expanded her work into advocacy and children's publishing. Her projects focus on helping families talk about medical experiences in ways that are honest, age-appropriate, and integrating without reducing children to their diagnoses. Across all of her work, the connecting thread is mental health. Whether through business, advocacy, or storytelling, Sarah focuses on how people make sense of challenging experiences, build self-understanding, and relate to themselves with more honesty and care. Sarah, I am so happy to welcome you to the show today, so welcome.
Thank you so much for having me. That was such a stellar introduction, so I really appreciate it.
Of course. Well, I loved talking to you when we had our coffee chat. And when we first connected, one of the things that I had also mentioned to you is that the series is about women for this March series, which you are a part of. And what I wanted you to be a part of is the Women of Grace series. And as you know, the month of March is all about women's empowerment, with your episode airing on Women's International Day. So for this month of March, I really wanted this series to be about women who have really weathered storms with strength, with deep faith, and really unwavering emotional resilience, I truly believe, and how through it all, you and the women for this series have navigated your lives with trust, surrender, and the courage to choose love over fear, because I think that can really be scary to do when you're in the midst of things. And again, even in the hardest of seasons. So I'm really, really excited to talk to you today. And so with that being said, I want to first talk about your story, because we did talk a little bit about it on our coffee chat. You had shared when we first connected how your daughter's congenital heart defect became a defining season in your life, and not just as a mother, but as a leader and a founder of a business. So for our listeners who are tuning in today, can you take us back to that time? What was happening for you as you were navigating her medical journey while also carrying the weight of scaling your company, which you then, of course, finally sold and stepped into other venues?
Yeah, I think it was kind of a whirlwind experience, to say the least. As I'm growing, scaling, potentially thinking about selling, and then ultimately ended up deciding to sell and go through an acquisition, I was pregnant for pretty much all of the acquisition process and what that looked like. And I was very intentional at that time that I wanted people to not think I was selling my business because I was pregnant. Like I was selling my business because this was the right move for me professionally and my family, but also my students and customers. And so to give just a little bit of perspective, I created a nurse practitioner review course company. And what that means is I helped other nurse practitioners, because I am one myself, to better pass their board exams. And, really the core premise of that was better mental health. And it's funny to think about my business because my business grew so fast and so exponentially that I started almost to put my mental health on the back burner, which I'm like so bummed looking back at myself on that because here I create this phenomenal, impactful business helping it's predominantly women who become nurse practitioners pass their board exams and have better mental health and confidence along the way. And I was kind of deteriorating my own along the way as well to create this thing because it was such a rocket ship. And so I ended up having the experience of I sold my business in June of 2022. And so I often tell people I'm like riding the highest high of my life. Like, you think this is such a pinnacle of my professional life and my career and what comes next. And obviously, too, I had really big visions and dreams of, okay, what does my new role look like within the company to purchase mine? Like, I'm going to move into an executive suite role. I'm going to be their chief nursing officer. We've got to integrate this company. And it was just 3 weeks after selling my business. And I was 36 weeks pregnant at the time. And we were so lucky we found out at all. But ultimately, found out my daughter, who we thought was healthy, was going to have 4 different heart defects. And those 4 heart defects were gonna require 2 open heart surgeries in her first year of life alone for her to even have a chance at a life, and then she would go on to have more open heart surgeries throughout her life. And so it was very much just like stick in the same moment of, I've built this incredible thing to the point of being able to sell it. And we're now trying to integrate into this bigger company and dream and envision what the future looks like. But I also have this very harsh reality of like, I have a baby who is incredibly sick and who needs me. And not only does she need me, but my husband needs me. And we've got to be a team to take this on. And trying to navigate and negotiate both roles was an incredible challenge.
Yeah, I can imagine. I mean, you're being a new mom, plus you're trying to like exit a
First time mom.
company. Right, absolutely. And you're trying to also make sure that all of the ducks are in a row as far as like the business that you're stepping down from being the owner, but to a supportive role.
Mm,
And I feel like for me, just listening to what you just shared, it's that mindset of always wanting to serve, because I think that's really where you're coming from, is that service mindset and always looking out like, okay, how do I make it easier for them? Like that just kind of came
for sure.
across to me from what you just shared. But then also having this other thing that came into your life, this other challenge that came into your life, like how do we as a team, you and your husband, be able to navigate that? And I'm sure, I mean, obviously, you don't know these things and you think everything's going to be fine. You're not expecting this to happen. And of course, now you have to step into a role where you really are on that. You don't know what's going to happen, especially in the first year of life. Like that's obviously probably very scary what happened for you to watch your daughter, an infant, go through something so invasive in her body, right? But she was able to pull through.
Yes, so
And
she had
I think that's amazing.
yeah, she had her first heart surgery at 6 days old, and she emergently had her second heart surgery. So, essentially, the first one was a patch for her to grow bigger and stronger and then to have the major surgery, and she emergently had that major surgery at 4 months old. So, she kinda went through a host of complications and kind of a weird in-between time of, like, what does this look like long term, and we don't really know quite yet. But around 6 months old, we were finally able to get out of the hospital for, like, a good stint of time and have some real in-between time between surgeries, and she's 3.5 today, and she is incredible and so fun, and we hope that we have another year or 2 before her next surgery, but once we made it out of the hospital with her and we had kinda survived those first 6 months of her existence, It was very stark and apparent to me, like, if I'm gonna show up as a mom in the way that I wanna show up, and I'm gonna show up as an employee, but not only an employee, but still a leader within my business and a leader within my vertical and do this the way that I wanna do it, I've really gotta take some control and some more agency and ownership over my mental health again. It was something I had done in the past, but I felt like I was doing something different this time and almost like a new flavor. And that was ultimately what led to me getting my OCD diagnosis. So my daughter gets out of the hospital in January of 2023, and by the end of January, I had an OCD diagnosis and a new treatment plan and a whole new path.
Yeah, well, I love that you actually, I mean, I love the fact, and it's obviously it's not the best story as far as like what happened. You had to go through this. I'm so happy that your daughter is still here and that
Yeah.
she's
I'm so grateful
thriving
every
and
day. I'm, like, in
yeah,
awe
and
of her every day.
yeah, I love that. And I love the fact that one of the words that you used, which was really nice, and I loved it, was the word fun, like, she's so fun, and I love that, like, that there's joy there, so I really love that you shared that. One of the things that you just talked about, OCD, like, you and I, we talked about this briefly on our coffee chat, and it's like this hidden, I don't know, I wouldn't say it's a disability, but it's a hidden challenge that we can not necessarily suffer from, but have to try to navigate our lives through. And it's something that I never really openly talked about myself until, I do talk to other people have an experience around OCD, but it's something that you don't necessarily talk about. And it's not something that people readily can see. And when they look at you, they think, well, there's nothing wrong with you, but they don't understand like what that even means. So you've again shared openly with me on our coffee chat. You just shared now about how you got your OCD diagnosis, the month that your daughter was released from the hospital. And you have also talked about one of the things you shared with me was anxiety and how you've had to learn to work with your nervous system. And that changed everything for you. Again, when we first spoke about the podcast, I shared my journey with OCD and how it feels to live with something that you can't really see, but how it affects your life. So for women who are used to pushing through, especially because the nervous system is something that you really dialed into, what does it actually mean to work with your nervous system instead of overriding it?
I think you can only push through for so long. And looking back on my life and my business, I think I had so much anxiety when I started my business because my business really started out of my own pain point, right? I was having all this big, huge anxiety about taking this exam. I was doing every review course out there to try to squelch that anxiety. And then I took the exam and I realized, like, oh, I could create my own resource and I know what I want this to look like because I've just had this big experience, right? But then through the creation of my business, because it was happening so rapidly and I almost like couldn't catch up sometimes to what was happening in my life, like it was just such a whiplash experience to go from making 40 grand as a nurse to being a millionaire in a year and coming from really rural Eastern Kentucky. Like that is just a full whiplash experience. But I really used the building of my business to keep outrunning my anxiety. And I hate that it had to be an event such as my daughter being sick for me to slow down and reconsider what I was doing about my life and my mental health, but that's ultimately what happened to me. And I think what I love to share with people about OCD, and it's been so cool for me here recently. I mean, not cool that people are being diagnosed and have this disorder, but because I've been sharing on podcasts and I've been sharing on Instagram, like I've helped multiple people get diagnosed with OCD that have had this their entire lives and they just didn't have the right language for it. Which, by the way, was also my experience. Like looking back on my life, I know I've always had OCD. It was a huge part of my business. I was super obsessive compulsive about the things going on in my business. Delegation was hard, those sorts of things. But at its very core, as you know, OCD is an intolerance of uncertainty. And so when people think about OCD and they think about hand washing, they get a very limited view and perspective because what the hand washing actually is just a symptom of a bigger problem. Like someone gets something on their hands and they can't sit with the uncertainty of what if it's COVID, what if it's this, what if, and now I need to compulsively wash my hands to try to squelch these what ifs. And I had never lived with such a deep depth of uncertainty than having my daughter. and not knowing if she was gonna make it through her surgeries, and then if she did make it through her surgeries, what does life look like on the other side? Because, one of the complications that she had was a brain bleed, and they told us when we left the hospital at 6 months, "You'll just have to see how this unfolds." Like, we think she's probably gonna be okay, but we don't know for sure, and we're gonna make you an appointment when she's 18 months old to have her evaluated. So that was a whole year's worth of time to sit in all this uncertainty and hope she's gonna catch up, but not know if she is, which ultimately I was like, I'm not operating in real life anymore. Like, this OCD thing and this compulsively checking and always wanting to make sure, like, is she okay and do the right thing, and there's a lot of hyper responsibility and perfectionism that come alongside OCD too. They really can only try to work with it for so long before you have to get some different structured help, and the most interesting thing about OCD to me is that a lot of times traditional therapy makes it a lot worse because there are very sneaky OCD compulsions out there, like reassurance seeking, like, what do you think? Do you love me? Those sorts of things, but also avoidance as a compulsion as well. And so in traditional talk therapy, you can get a ton of reassurance, but it only makes your OCD worse. You have to be able to just sit in that uncertainty and, that's kinda the lifelong journey of my life right now is figuring out how to best sit in uncertainty and operate in my day to day.
Yeah, I love that you shared that. And one of the things too that was so like it just stood out to me is what you said. I use my business to outrun my anxiety, and I think that's it's like for me for the way some of my compulsions was more about I check even still sometimes when I get really stressed I check the door even though I
Mhm.
saw myself lock the door like I literally saw myself and I check it I see myself check it and then I check it again to make sure it's locked.
Oh,
And that's
yes.
usually when stress comes in. And I think a part of that for me is comes down to a safety factor because there were just a lot of things that happened to me growing up where I didn't feel safe. And this was my way of controlling my environment to make sure that everything was locked tight. And so I love that you went a little bit deeper into it and you talked about it. One of the things I wanted to follow up with to that question was, especially to what you were talking about with OCD and our nervous system in that, is what's an early signal that you think women often miss that their system is overloaded?
I mean, just bare bones, basic signal. When your sleep starts to deteriorate, you're usually already overloaded. For me, like that's been a big just clue in, like, oh, like I haven't slept well this week, and oh, maybe I didn't sleep well last week either. And sleep is really integral fuel for me to be able to show up, but not only show up, but to manage my OCD. I find when I don't sleep, when I don't eat enough, you start missing those basic needs, everything else dials up in response.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, I want to get back to your business that you had built,
Yeah.
the educational business that you built before you again sold it and stepped down into a different role. I know a lot of women aspire to do this, but you've also been really honest about your anxiety, about OCD, about your journey in life. And my question for you is, how did you begin to separate the drive that was aligned for you from the drive that was fueled by fear?
That is a really big question. And I feel like the very first inklings of drive not fueled by fear was I had this goal in my mind. I'm like, if I can hit $1 million, then I can quit my full time job. I was still working my full time job, by the way. So if I can hit $1 million, this is a legitimate business and I can quit my full time job and I can lean in and all this stuff. And then $1 million came and went. And I did not feel that security whatsoever. And I kind of had this moment of realizing like this goalpost is going to continue to move for me. Like, okay, it was 1 million and I did the thing and now it's 2 million. I'm gonna hit 2 million and what's the next goal gonna be? Is it gonna be three? Is it gonna be five? Like I don't think there's any monetary amount that's going to create safety for me because that's really what I'm seeking and really what I'm scared about. And I was working with a really excellent business coach at the time, and she very much made me lean into redefining what my definition of success even looked like. And, some people define success by business metrics, and I did that for a long time. But what I had to rework and redefine for myself so I wasn't just fueled by fear all the time was what success looked like for me. And for me, that's a feeling of like peace in my body. And I don't always get there, like being anxious and having OCD and like some days are good and some days are bad. But at the end of the day, like my goal for myself and my definition of success is feeling at peace in my body and wanting to be present in my body.
Yeah, and thinking about it's hard because especially when you're dealing with something like OCD that really and anxiety that really they play off of each other, and especially because you do have a lot of things going on in your life, but you're also building a life and you're also I believe showing your daughter that you're that's why I think you use a joyful word of fun
Mm.
because you're showing her like okay life can be good regardless of what
Yeah.
the challenges are, life can be good. And so one of the things I guess I would follow up to that is like, what helped you, do you think, helped you rebuild that trust in the process?
I think what helped me rebuild the trust in the process was, I really took a bet on myself to even start my business. People will ask me, they're like, what's your biggest accomplishment? And they always assume it's going to be selling my business. But for me, it was starting my business because that was such a leap of faith. And then throughout the process of my business, I had to make so many pivotal and big decisions. And I really had to lean into my gut. And I'm like, what do I think? What do I feel? Like, if I turn out all the noise and all the external stuff going on, like, what do I actually think about the situation? How do I want to move forward building this business? And when I didn't listen to that, it always fell apart. And when I did listen to that, it was always successful. And so I kept having to really lean into my gut and it build up the trust in myself. And eventually, when it came to the point of selling my business, there were many, many people who told me not to sell. And I just I felt inherently in my bones, this is the right decision. I know it's right for me. I know it's right for my family. I know it's right for my employees, my students. Like, I think everyone will be better served. And then to do the acquisition and then find out Meadow was sick, it felt like this incredible validation in me and my gut because I was like, I can't imagine if I was still trying to run this business day in and day out in the way I was before and live in the hospital while my daughter has open heart surgery. Like, I feel like it could have, I don't know if it would have been an implosion for my business, but it definitely would have been detrimental to my business. And I think just having the repeated experience of trusting myself and seeing it work out was huge.
Yeah, what stands out for me, I think, is that you have like emphasis on like the integration piece rather than just bypassing the hard because everyone can bypass the hard. Like
Mhm.
we don't like the hard, right?
Yeah, hard is uncomfortable, it's weird.
Of course. And a lot of the time it's because we're stretching ourselves and we think, oh, this is too hard. But it's usually just we're feeling uncomfortable because it's asking more of us and it's something that we've asked for, but it's asking more of us to like step into. So for those high achievers out there, because I know, especially in the world that we live in, I think high achieving, being a high achiever is almost being glorified to be a high achiever, high performing, because you're awarded for doing more, being more, and all of that. So why do you think someone who's a high performing woman, especially, she's prone to maybe bypassing her difficult emotions? And what do you think will shift for her when she actually stops trying to optimize her pain and instead she allows it to inform her? Because I feel like that if we allow ourselves to move through it, it's so much easier than trying to bypass it and go around it. Like you were saying, therapy can do that. I think therapy brings you back to your pain over and over again. That's what I've seen
Mhm.
traditional therapy do. I don't necessarily, I think I had one therapy session when I was a kid and I didn't like it and I never went back. I know things have changed, but I feel like a lot of the time we can use I use my pain from my past all the time to be able to inspire others. So instead of allowing it to define who I am. And so I allow it to inform myself, like the person sitting across from me, how can I best serve them based on even experiences that may not be similar, but it's something that I can come from that empathetic place. So I hope that I made sense with my question. If you need me to repeat it, let me know.
Yeah, no, I'll do my best to answer, and if it wasn't what you were asking, we can chat. But
Okay.
I think ultimately when you don't feel your feelings and you don't sit in the grief or the discomfort or the uncomfortable, it doesn't go away. It just hangs out and lingers with you for longer. And then it's gonna pop up when you least want it and you don't expect it. And I've had many experiences throughout my life because I have complex PTSD. And I think when you're a child, especially, and I think about this through the lens of my daughter every single day, there are two reasons that you store trauma in the body. One is you don't have a clear narrative around what happened. And oftentimes, when you're a child, it's hard for you to have a clear narrative unless someone works on that with you. And then the second part is you have to be able to express that narrative. Now, it doesn't necessarily mean it always has to be out loud, but whether that's journaling or making art or talking about it, like whatever that looks like for you. And when you can do those two things, that's why two humans can live through the same traumatic event, and one has traumatic symptoms and different things afterwards, and the other does not. And it's just an event that happened in their life. And so, what I have found, because obviously, even in the last 5, 6 years, like living through this with my daughter, like that was very traumatic for me. And, when she had her second surgery, it is no exaggeration that she nearly died. And so I really had to think and sit with, like, how do I feel these big feelings and not become all consumed by these feelings and show up for her and help her create a clear narrative that she can then express so she doesn't store this in her body, even though she had that surgery at such a young age. And I really like what I've found the last few years in advocacy work is what a gift it is for me that it really takes the weight out of the experience a lot of the time to be able to turn it into this other thing and do some storytelling and use my medical expertise to then go do advocacy work out in the world. Um, Last year, my daughter, she ended up having to have allergy testing. And it was the first time, when she had her heart surgeries, obviously she wasn't old enough really for us to have that conversation really at that time. But with this allergist appointment, she was going to get 40 pokes on her back to see what was going on. She was having terrible eczema. And, I did the whole thing of like, okay, we're going to show up to the allergist and you're going to take off your shirt and we're going to do these pokes and we're not going to be able to put her shirt back on, which for her is traumatic because that child loves to be clothed. And, this is the process we're going to go through. And it was so cool last year. I mean, for 6 months afterwards, it felt like every other day, but at least multiple times a week, she would just retell this story all the time. But my hope is in the long term, that she was able to feel her feelings about it. She was able to get them out, and it's not something she's going to store with her long term. Now, I know that's kind of a silly example, but I also
Not at all.
have a child who is going to be 4 or 5 having another open heart surgery, and what a skill for her to be able to have in the future.
No, I love that. I feel like it's not a silly story. It's actually very important because, especially such a young age and having to go through all of
Just a
these
baby.
things, right? She still is. And having to deal with this and try to be able to navigate how she feels around it, especially when everything is still forming, how she
Mhm.
forms her thoughts, how
Her
she thinks about
self-concept.
things, her self-esteem, everything. But I feel like having you and your husband to really help her to ground her into this and you doing the work that you've done, I think is really incredible to help her because this, I feel like she actually almost has like that workbook, if you will, from mom and dad. Like, don't worry, this is okay. This is
Yeah,
what we're going to
toolkit.
help you to go through, right? Your toolkit, right? So I love that. Well, let's talk about your book because you and I, we talked about this
Mhm.
earlier before we had our coffee chat, and you told me it was going to be coming out around the time that the podcast aired, but we had our discussion, and you have said that that book has already been launched. So,
Yeah,
first of all, congratulations. That is incredible. It's amazing. I love
thank
the
you.
fact that, yeah, it's a children's book. So, I want you to, can you tell us about it, what it's called, what it's about, and what inspired you to write it?
Yeah, absolutely. So my children's book is called Meadow, which is my daughter's name, Meadow and Her Four-Leaf Clover Heart. And kind of along that same vein of what we were just talking about, of how do we give her a narrative? How do we reframe the narrative? What does that look like? How does she express it? That was really the beginnings of this book because I had this beautiful synchronicity that happened in which I found out that the same odds as having Meadow's heart defect are the same odds as finding a four-leaf clover. And when we think about four-leaf clovers, there are no negative connotations. People are like abundance and good luck and like what a beautiful thing to find and just how lucky you are. And so I started saying to Meadow, like, oh, this is your four-leaf clover heart because she has four defects too. And we kind of started talking back and forth and it evolved into this thing of like, oh, like, you know, one leaf is for this and one leaf is for courage and one leaf is for love. And eventually I was like, I think this should be a book. Like I really I love to write and a big part of my business was just writing the courses and teaching the courses and all that goes into that. And I was like, I would just really love to write a book to other heart families and other heart parents because there are some in the space, but there are not a ton by any means. And there's way less that work to reframe the narrative of your heart defect is a part of you, but it's not your entire identity by a long shot. And a lot of people, when they meet Meadow today, I mean, literally earlier this week, we were horseback riding. She does gymnastics. She does all this incredible cool stuff. And people just have no idea what she's lived through and the surgeries that she has had. And I think when she was first born, inadvertently, I started just already to put her into boxes of what she could and couldn't do, and she has blown me out of the water with everything that she continues to do and she aspires to do and wants to do, and I really wanted to create a book that encapsulated that about all children born with heart defects because at the end of the day, it's the most common birth defect. 1 in 100 children will be born with one. And I would love for any child who has a heart defect to be able to read the story and see themselves in it and kind of paint a vision for the future.
Oh my gosh. I was just getting that visual when you were telling me everything that
Mhm.
she was doing. And it was like I was visualizing Meadow and doing all of these things. I love that. I think it's an incredible thing that she is not letting life's challenges stop her from
Oh,
actually
yeah, she
living
lives
her
right
life.
alongside it. Yeah.
I love that. So what have you learned from about that then, about the resilience that your daughter, when you're watching your daughter, navigate this journey of life that, she's such a young girl and she's just navigating and just going full steam ahead.
I am blown away from her. It's funny, as adults, we have things happen, we get so bogged down by them, and it is so eye-opening to watch a child go through so many hard things, and then just be able to live her life right alongside it and not get stuck in it and not get stuck in the mud. And so for me, we live on this duality all the time, I feel like, of grief and joy. But I feel like you can't feel the real joy without feeling a little bit of the grief alongside it. And I just live in awe of her every day. And I genuinely mean that. Like, it is so cool to be her mom. And it's been such an incredible experience for me, as painful as it's been as well, to be a heart mom as well and be able to stand alongside her as we figure out all this really tough stuff.
Yeah. Well, I love hearing her story and I definitely am rooting for her and hope that her
Thank
life
you.
continues to be as incredible today all the way when we keep staying in touch, because I hope to stay in touch with all of my guests, especially when there's something like this that I feel can really inspire the world. That the challenges do not have to stop us.
Yeah.
We just have to be we have to just be courageous enough to step into something even when it feels hard. So, as I said in the beginning, and when we talked, this series is about honoring women who, again, rise with softness. They have strength, especially under pressure. And when you think about your journey through anxiety, through entrepreneurship, through motherhood and advocacy, what does grace mean to you now? Has it changed in any way since you stepped out of your as business owner into the work that you do now?
Yeah, I think the first experience that came to mind with grace in particular, and I can't remember if we talked about this in our call, but a big thing that happened in my life that really propelled me into, I feel like, this timeline that I'm living in and creating this business and having all these conversations about mental health is when I was in nursing school. And ultimately, I had a panic attack at a clinical site. And if that was not embarrassing and humiliating enough because I'd never had a public panic attack before, I was actually asked to leave my nursing program altogether because they felt like I was too anxious to be a safe nurse. And I really I had to hold a lot of grace for myself, but also within myself to almost it was the first time I'd advocated for myself, to be honest. Like, it was like, I wanna stay in this program. I don't think that this anxiety thing has to be the one moment, the thing that defines me for the rest of my life. I hope that I can prove that to them and they can see that too. And then being able to go into the dean's office, go into the ombudsman's office, and just hold myself a lot of grace and say, like, I wanna be here. I wanna try. Like, please let me try. And then being able to one day craft that experience into teaching other nursing students how to better manage their anxiety, which one day led to creating a test prep business centered around mental health and anxiety and better holding yourself. But I just look back and I feel like if I hadn't had grace for myself in that moment, how different would my life have looked today? You know, how different would life look even with my daughter? Because that was a pivotal moment for me too in taking ownership and accountability of my mental health and what that looked like moving forward.
Yeah, I love that. Well, what would you, just a final question, what
Mhm.
would you want our audience to walk away with today after hearing your story, after knowing that life, obviously we know life goes on lifing. It's just the way, things happen around us. And if they're maybe they are not necessarily, I don't know if they're struggling, but maybe they are struggling and they are looking at success in a different way, that their version of success maybe doesn't match the lifestyle they're actually living. What advice would you give to women who are sensing that their current version of success is no longer fitting, and what can they do?
I think my ultimate advice is always lean into authenticity. Like, you know what is best for you, you know what your hopes and dreams are. And I think alongside that, being open and being vulnerable, and I know that's easier said than done, to the hard stuff. Like, everybody has their hard stuff. And when I think about my business, what resonated with people was I literally just showed up, even though it was kind of embarrassing the first few times I did it. And I'm like, hello, I'm Sarah Michelle Boes. I've had panic attacks my entire life. I had panic attacks preparing to take this exam. And now I want to show you the toolkit and the toolbox that I have built to better manage my anxiety so you can pass this exam alongside me. But I was shocked, and I cannot say enough, how blown away I was when I started my business and I kinda put myself out there in that way and named that hard thing, how many people felt immediately seen and validated and supported in an experience that they had been having for a really long time, but they were really afraid to say because at the end of the day, nursing especially is kind of a nurses eat their young sort of world. It's kind of archaic in that sense. And so a lot of people are told to stuff down their anxiety and stuff down their mental health stuff. And so to be one of the first people in that space to just name it and save a thing, and it takes the fear out of it to save a thing too. But the more people that can have those hard, difficult, uncomfortable conversations and name the thing, I think the better off we'll all be as humans, but also the better off the world will be too.
Yeah. Oh, I love that. Yeah, I totally agree with you. And I love the advice that you've left our listeners with. Sarah, it has been an incredible pleasure having you on for this series, sharing your journey, being open and vulnerable, and telling us about how your daughter Meadow is doing, the things that you're doing because of being inspired even by your daughter, to being able to step down from a multi-million dollar business as business owner and
Mm.
stepping into a supportive role. I think that's incredible. I've really appreciated the honesty that you've shared, because I think that a lot of times people see the front story, but they don't always understand that there is a backstory. And that backstory can be so much more powerful to inspire and encourage someone to go out and live their life. So I really love that you have shared so openly. And I wanted to say, and I have actually a mantra that I started saying this year.
Ooh.
Yeah, so I started saying I can do hard things, and no matter what happens, no matter what life throws at me, I can do hard things. Because I really believe that, even though hard things might not even get easier. Like people think, oh, well, it'll get easier, but maybe hard things don't get easier. It's that we get stronger. And I believe that. And so it's just a reminder to me, again, that as I was saying earlier, that life will keep on lifing, but that doesn't mean that I have to stop living and exploring and doing life, right? So I just wanted to say that I love our conversation. I'm excited for your book that's out.
Thank you.
Told me that you've already sold a lot of copies already, and I think that's incredible. I think it's so amazing. I want to thank you for just modeling what strength really means, especially, and to be that woman of grace. So I just want to say thank you so very much for being here today.
Oh, thank you so much too. Me and Meadow, that's actually one of our mantras as well. We say it a little bit different. We say we can do hard things. So she always knows like I'm right there with her. And we literally did something this morning that was hard. And she immediately looked at me. She's like, we can do hard things. And I was like, oh.
Yeah, just kind of melts your heart, right?
Yeah, I was like, I'm going to burst into tears. Thank you.
Well, thank you so very much. And to our listeners, if you'd like to connect with Sarah directly and learn more about the work she's doing, you can find her contact information in the show notes. Remember, grace is not about having it all figured out. It's about choosing honesty over image, presence over pressure, and self-trust over fear, even when the path feels uncertain. When you learn to work with yourself instead of against yourself, you begin to lead, to love, and live from a place that's steady and true. Until next time, keep dreaming, keep believing, and keep designing your extraordinary life one day at a time. Thank you for joining me on Her Extraordinary Life by Design. I hope you've been inspired and empowered by the incredible stories shared on this show. If you enjoyed this episode and the conversations we've had, I would greatly appreciate if you could take a moment to leave a review. Your feedback and support mean the world to me, and it will help others discover the podcast and join our empowering community. Remember to hit the subscribe button so you never miss an episode. Together, we can continue to learn from these amazing women, uncover their extraordinary journeys, and be motivated to create our own lives by design. Thank you again for tuning in. Until next time, stay empowered and keep shaping your extraordinary life one day at a time.
Hey, I'm DC. I host a radio show on multiple genres. There's rock, there's metal, there is country, and I talk to the artists, and I take those interviews from the radio, and I put them into a podcast, which is called Behind the Rock with DC. Check it out, Behind the Rock with DC, a podcast that brings you a little bit closer to the bands, a little bit closer to the artists. Please subscribe to the podcast today.
Electricast.
For those of you who dream of a world where music and podcasts live together in perfect harmony, now for the first time, Electricast gives you a magical compilation, Pod Till You Drop, Volume 1, where we give you the best in tunes and the best in podcasts. Feast your ears and hear the culture. Available now wherever you listen to music.